morning, everyone. I would invite you to rise in body or in spirit and open in our gray hymnal to hymn number 220, Bring Out the Festal Bread, hymn number 220. Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. What modern pharaohs live in arrogance crowned? Who shall be sent to challenge folly unbounded? Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. Chains still there are to break, their days are not finished. Metal or saddle made, they're still not diminished. Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. Still does resentment bind each brother and sister. Still do the plagues affect us red as the river. Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. Long be our journeying, yet justice is worth it. Dance, Sister Miriam, and help us to birth it. Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. O people, lift your heads and look to the mountains. Bushes aflame still call us, rocks still gush fountains. Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. Thank you, everyone.
Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor. If you're newer to our community or we just haven't had the chance to meet yet, I'm the Reverend Manish Mishra-Marzetti, serving our community as senior minister, and it's my privilege to welcome you on behalf of myself and our chancel team today. Whether you're here in the sanctuary with us in person, live streaming from home right now, or watching on demand at a later time, we are glad that you've made the choice to be together with one another and with us in community. Our congregation has been meeting continuously here in the city of Ann Arbor since 1865, helping bring alive the message and vision of a liberal and free faith, one in which each of us is free to explore and discover for ourselves what it means to be human. And as we do so on that human journey, we support one another through our collective love and care. If you are newer to our community and are here with us in person, following the conclusion of this Sunday service, we invite you to join us in a room that's called the Redmond Room. Outside those double doors, it is your first room to the left. There will be members of our staff or our laity that are available to answer questions about Unitarian Universalism more broadly, or our congregation more specifically. If you're live streaming and are newer to us, we invite you to take just a moment now to enter your name in the chat, and you might share where you're joining us from. I know there'll be other members of our community who will be glad to warmly greet you and welcome you into that space. If you're watching on demand at a later time, we invite you to feel free to contact Reverend Mandy Beal, our acting coordinator of the membership journey, or truly any member of our staff team up to and including myself. Any of us would be happy to answer your questions and help you learn more about our tradition and our congregation specifically. If you are newer and are joining us electronically, we invite you to also go to our website, go to UUAA.org/newcomer-survey. There's a brief survey to fill out that will help us stay in touch with you and help inform you about upcoming events in our community. A couple of announcements this Sunday. Following the conclusion of our service in the social hall, our Vision 2050 leaders have a table available in which you can, if you show up there, there's a raffle. I don't know what the prizes are, but there's a raffle you can enter, and also a brief survey that they might invite you to take. In addition, I want to just mention that I've noticed the past couple of Sundays, our auction team has a table in the social hall as well. If you've never attended one of our congregation's auctions, this is a really fun church-wide event. It's happening June 1st this year, and the theme is superheroes, intentionally intergenerational, all ages welcome. So please be sure to stop by the auction table in the social hall as well to learn more and get your tickets to the auction. This Sunday, our service today coincides with the Jewish holiday of Passover, and whether you may be culturally or religiously honoring Passover on behalf of our whole community, we offer you Hag Pesach Sameach, happy Passover, Passover greetings. In drawing on the themes of Passover, this Sunday our service will reflect on the nature of oppression and what may be needed to free ourselves from the patterns that oppress others and even ourselves. For now, as we move more deeply into that time together, our time together this morning, I invite you to find a place of centering and grounding in your hearts.
To begin our service, we join Unitarian Universalists around the world in lighting our chalice, the symbol of our faith. Let us remember that the flaming chalice was designed during World War II by the Unitarian Service Committee and used as a sign of safe passage for those fleeing the dangers and oppression of fascism. We have carried this symbol forward and keep it burning in our congregations and in our hearts as a reminder of the values that inspired its creation. Its flame lights our path as we seek to create a world of equity, justice, and love. If you are with us online, I invite you to join in this ritual by preparing your own chalice or candle. And if you wish, you may enter your location in the chat so all may see the strength of our light. This morning, Nancy Shuey will kindle our flame here in the sanctuary, and Nancy will join us now. And as our chalice is lit, let us greet anew the enduring beauty and warmth of its light, a light that offers us shelter and renewal and hope. And now together let us say, we light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace. Thank you, Nancy. We are bound in community by our covenant, the promises we make to each other as we journey together. Covenant is the core of our faith, that which holds us and keeps us true to ourselves and to each other. When we falter, we are called to renew our promises, rebuild our bonds, and begin again in love. Every week when we speak our covenantal words, we honor each other and strengthen the circle that holds us. Together, let us say, the spirit of this church is love, and service is its law. This is our covenant with each other, to dwell together in peace, to search for truth in love, and to help one another.
Would you rise as you're comfortably able to join together in song to remind ourselves for the last time this month of this congregation's climate work and commitment by singing the words to number 377, which will also be found in front of you on the screens. In Greening Lands begins the song. What do we do when we see a friend struggling under a weight much too heavy for anyone to lift alone? What about a stranger, or someone who looks or sounds or lives very different than ourselves? What if the weight were so heavy, so big, and had been there so long that some people tell us that it shouldn't be moved, that it couldn't be moved, that things have always been this way, that things will always be this way, that's just the way things are? What if someone had a different idea? Today's story for all ages is Desmond Gets Free by Matt Meyer with illustrations by Kim Pham. Desmond the mouse lived in the most beautiful meadow in all the land. Every morning, Desmond woke with the sunrise and would spend the day playing in the meadow. Every evening, Desmond would go to sleep in the middle of that meadow under the beautiful starry sky. One night, though, Desmond awoke when it was still dark out. He tried to roll over to a more comfortable spot, but something wasn't right. Desmond realized that his tail was stuck right to the ground and beginning to throb with pain. He felt behind him, and there was a huge boulder that seemed to have fallen in the middle of the meadow, just on his tail. Desmond pushed on the boulder and tugged on his tail. He pushed on the boulder and tugged on his tail, and he pushed and tugged and pushed and tugged. But it was no use. When he was out of breath and had just about given up, he saw a giraffe nearby in the grass. "Good news," he thought. "Oh, giraffe," Desmond cried, "could you please push the boulder a few inches in the other direction so that I could go free?" The giraffe looked at Desmond and laughed, the way giraffes do. "Silly mouse," said the giraffe, "that's no boulder. That's an elephant that's fallen asleep in the middle of the meadow, just on your tail." "Well, if you could just wake the elephant and ask him to roll over just a few inches in the other direction, I could go free." "Well," replied the giraffe, "you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best to not get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like this." Desmond quietly replied, "Well, I do not appreciate your neutrality." The giraffe wandered off, and Desmond tried calling out to the elephant to wake him up. But those giant ears were just too far away on the other side of that giant elephant body. So again, Desmond pushed on the elephant and tugged on his tail. He pushed and he tugged and he pushed and he tugged, but it was no use. When he was out of breath and had just about given up again, a gazelle wandered by. "Oh, gazelle," he cried. "Oh, gazelle, it seems that an elephant has fallen asleep just on my tail in the middle of this meadow. I'm stuck and it hurts. I wonder if you could gently wake him up and ask him to roll over just a few inches in the other direction so I might go free." "Well," said the gazelle, "I see your problem there, but you know what they say about sleeping elephants, letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like these." Desmond replied, almost to himself this time, "I do not appreciate your neutrality." Desmond tried again to call out to the elephant. He tried again to push the giant animal away. He tried again and again to tug his little tail free, but it was no use. When he was out of breath and had just about given up for the last time, he saw another mouse wandering through the meadow. "My name is Nelson." "Nelson, this giant elephant has fallen asleep just on my tail in the middle of this meadow. I wonder if you might run over and call out into his giant ears and ask him to roll over just a few inches in the other direction so I could go free," Desmond asked. "Of course," said Nelson. Nelson ran all the way to the other end of that giant elephant body, and he called up to those giant elephant ears at the top of that giant elephant head. But the elephant didn't budge. The elephant heard Nelson's small voice far away, but he felt too comfortable to move. So Nelson ran back to Desmond, a little out of breath, and said, "I have an idea. Don't move." He ran off. "I won't," muttered Desmond. A little while later, though, Nelson emerged through the tall grass, and he wasn't alone. Nelson had found 3 other mouse friends to help him, and each one of them had also brought another 3 friends. The whole group of them ran over to the giant head of that giant elephant. One mouse scrambled up onto the shoulders of another, and another mouse scrambled up on her shoulders. And then, one after another, they climbed up until the whole group of them had formed a long mouse ladder right up to the side of the elephant. At last, Nelson climbed up the shoulders of his mouse friends, one on top of the other, until he was way up on that giant elephant head, standing next to that giant elephant ear. "Excuse me," he called out right into that ear. "It seems you have fallen asleep on my friend's tail in the middle of this meadow. I wonder if you could just roll over a few inches in the other direction so that he might go free." The giant elephant made a giant low groan. "I'm comfortable just where I am. Go away." So Nelson asked more of his mouse friends to climb up. One by one, they helped each other up the side of the elephant. One by one, they called out into the giant elephant ear on top of that giant elephant head. Again, the giant elephant made a giant low groan. "Grumph! I'm comfortable just where I am. Go away." But then Nelson had an idea. He whispered to the mice, and then all at once, in one voice, they yelled out together, "Excuse us! It seems you've fallen asleep on our friend's tail in the middle of this meadow. Roll over a few inches in the other direction so he can go free." This time, all those voices together, right next to the elephant's ear, were too loud to ignore. "I was comfortable where I was, but I'll move over if you just agree to stop making such a racket," the elephant cried out. And then the elephant rolled over, just a few inches in the other direction. Nelson and the other mice helped each other climb back down, and Desmond was finally free. Desmond and Nelson and all their mouse friends spent the rest of that beautiful day playing in the middle of that beautiful meadow. The end. Now is the time in our service when we sing our children to today's Children's Chapel. I invite our elementary kids to follow their adult leaders out of the sanctuary and to the Jackson Chapel as the congregation sings with love and affection. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. For your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. Your divine, my divine. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. For your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. Your divine, my divine. For your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. Your divine, my divine.
As we move into the time of our weekly offering, let us reflect for a moment on the challenge of gratitude and generosity in a world of crises, war, and need. The oppressions of the world threaten to overwhelm us. How small and uncertain and alone we can feel. A spiritual practice of giving is no easy thing. It calls us to face the world with defiance, fortitude, and faith. When we join together, we are stronger. When we give together, we are enriched in ways we are still discovering. As we feed each other, our dreams take root to confront the oppressions of our time. What we pour into our congregation soars out into the world on the wings of our social action. Today's offering will go to the programs and ministries of this congregation. And there are a number of ways for you to give. You may text UUAA to 73256 or visit uuaa.org/giving and select weekly offering for the fund. Or you may drop cash or checks into the baskets as they make their rounds. However you choose to give, thank you for your generosity. I invite the ushers to please come forward as this morning's offering is gratefully given and received. Thank you, Allison. As our ushers now come forward, I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as you are comfortably able. And as we prepare to dedicate our offering, let us remember to answer fear and oppression with courage and love. Together, let us say, to the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Thank you. You may be seated. In honoring the themes of Passover this Sunday, we come face to face with the great overarching narrative of the Hebrew Bible, the gift of life and its renewal after hardship and oppression. In their origin stories, the Jewish people celebrate the rainbow of God's covenant after the flood, liberation from bondage in Egypt, and the joy of homecoming from exile in Babylon. Over and again, God remembers and keeps his promise to the Israelites, granting them release after much suffering and oppression. As history unfolds, the voice of the prophets calls through the ages for justice. We are to share our bread with the hungry and bring the homeless into our house, for God's gift is a promise that must be carried forward. Today's reading comes from Isaiah chapter 58, verses 9 and 10. If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday.
If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. What will it take for all of us collectively to do away with the yoke of oppression? This was a question, a theme that I came to for today's service, recognizing that it's in the time of Passover, well before my sabbatical had even started. A good topic, always a timely topic to visit. And then the sabbatical took place, and I had real-life experiences during the journey of that sabbatical that in the moment I thought, this is perfect. When we get to that end of April theme, this is exactly what I'm going to bring to you and talk about. I'm going to share with you some of what I experienced and learned during my sabbatical. And then this past week happened. Now, there's some things about this past week that are particular to me that you don't necessarily know about, so I'll share a few of those. This past week, I journeyed to Poland alongside the Board of Trustees of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. I co-chair that Board of Trustees. Now, not all of you know what the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee is, so let me offer a few words about that. The Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, which we sometimes call UUSC for short, is our humanitarian, international human rights organization that on behalf of all of us as Unitarian Universalists does the work around the globe of fighting oppression and standing up for the human rights and dignity of every human being. It is a beloved Unitarian Universalist institution. We love this organization and are grateful that it exists. The entire board traveled as a delegation to Poland to meet with our justice partners and the activists on the ground in Central and East Europe, which includes groups that are supporting refugees from Ukraine, but not just that, supporting in the region as well the rights and empowerment of women, racial and ethnic minorities, the needs of Romani people, and the needs of gay and lesbian, bi, transgender folk in the region as well. Not a small set of needs. It was not lost on me as I was there in Poland that that country is further along a far right-wing trajectory, one that could become part of this nation's history as well. And so recognizing that, seeing that ordinary women in the region had to think twice about whether they spoke up for their own rights and dignity or not, seeing how ethnic minorities, Black immigrants, Romani people, gay and lesbian folk, had to struggle with the simple decision around whether to stick up for themselves and point the way towards what was better and right, or to let their souls wither and die under oppression. It was humbling, to say the least, to see the everyday courage that activists were bringing to their work on behalf of others, not just themselves, but others for a better society. It was deeply inspiring. And of course, this part of the world, Eastern and Central Europe, during World War II, this was the part of Europe that gave rise to the need for the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee to be birthed. It was during World War II, as many minority groups were fleeing the possibility of being murdered by the Nazi regime, that the UUSC was born, specifically creating pathways and safe houses through which folks could flee the threat of death and persecution. Honoring that history, the entire board, we traveled to Auschwitz and Birkenau while we were in Warsaw and Krakow. Auschwitz is within distance of Krakow. I'm sure some of you have been to some of these World War II death camps. If you have, you know what I'm going to say next, what I'm going to mention, but if you haven't, I'll tell you it leaves an indelible mark on your soul. On your soul. To be in a space where the mass wholesale slaughter of human beings occurred is something you will not ever forget, and that will stay with you. While our board was there in Poland having these experiences, the observations of Polish society, that trajectory of far right-wing politics, the reminder of who we are as a people, what we did during World War II to save those that we could. We were actively following the news back here in the United States, which included news of the passage of a tremendous, huge aid package, which included aid for Israel, in and of itself, something fairly routine, but in the context of the past 6 months, something that deserves pause and deeper reflection. We read news as board members in the international press about the students at Columbia University who set up camp on their university lawn and were protesting, and them being arrested alongside some of their professors, and their courageous actions in support of human rights, sparking nationwide protests, including here in Ann Arbor at the University of Michigan's campus, which members of our local community joined on Friday and Saturday night. I heard news of Rabbi Alana Alpert, who spoke here just this past Wednesday, a Jewish rabbi who actively supports the dignity and rights of Palestinians. She spoke here in our community on Wednesday night, traveled the next day to Israel, and joined a mass protest with other rabbis and was promptly arrested by the IDF. I learned from Muslim local activists, over the weekend that she was released. That delegation, as they began, the rabbis who traveled to Gaza, as they began their pilgrimage and their protest there, they offered a joint statement that included these words, quote, "Passover, the holiday, is a reminder of our moral and Jewish responsibility to work for the freedom of every person. Amen." If there was ever a people who know through their scripture and through their lived history what the impact of slavery, oppression, and even genocide means, it is our Jewish siblings. We should look to them and also take heart in knowing that we Unitarian Universalists are also working for the freedom of every person. While my plane landed, as I returned to Detroit, I read on my phone the breaking news that Speaker Mike Johnson had traveled to New York City, not his area that he represents by any way, shape, or means, but traveled to New York City to help call for the resignation of Colombia's Muslim American president. Why? For not being pro-Jewish enough. And last night, for those who may have caught this, the annual Correspondents' Dinner in Washington, D.C., a lighthearted, usually jovial event. Hundreds of protesters in front of that event, lying down on the ground, protesting for the human rights of Palestinians. All of this gave me much pause. All of this began to give me much pause while I was even still just in Poland. You go to a death camp like Auschwitz and you are sitting there wondering, how is it possible that we human beings allow for atrocities on a mass scale to even happen? How is it that we allow this to even occur? Something that isn't just about the past, a question that isn't just about the past, World War II, it's very much also about our present. In that present, we know. Now, the term genocide gets used, but there actually are international processes, courts, lawyers with specialties who determine what is a genocide and what isn't. So I don't know what is a genocide and what isn't, but I can say atrocities committed by states, state-sanctioned atrocities. We know that Russia used indiscriminate violence in its invasion of Ukraine, murdering civilians in atrocious ways that President Biden has called a war crime. We know, now you may or may not know actually, because this next part of the world in Asia is not so well known to the average American, but it is a part of the world that our Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, the USC, is actively engaged in this. The state of Myanmar, formerly Burma, is undertaking intentional ethnic cleansing, murdering its ethnic minorities and or intentionally trying to drive them out, most significantly impacting a group called the Rohingya. 1 million plus Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh and elsewhere, even as the slaughter of minorities in Burma continues. And then the current situation which we know, what's been happening in Gaza, the indiscriminate killing by the Israeli state of civilians, the use of starvation against civilians to achieve military and political ends. Now, this third one is not the same as the other two. It's what's happened in Ukraine, what's happening in Burma. I want to say a word about that, because it's not possible in our current cultural climate to say a word, to even utter the phrase Palestinian human rights without needing a comma. And the comma is to acknowledge and talk about the suffering of Jewish folk. And so let me do the obligatory comma as we take a pause and acknowledge the suffering of the Palestinian people, that yes, I know that anti-Semitism has been on the rise over the past several years in the United States. It is deplorable, and it should not be the case. I know that the Hamas is holding 150 plus civilian hostages at the present moment. It is absolutely despicable. They should release those civilians immediately. Civilians should never be used as a pawn for political purposes. I know that some of these young adults on these college campuses in the heat of the moment have perhaps said something that sounds threatening or is anti-Semitic. I'm aware that that has happened, and they need to learn better. If they're fighting for and working for justice, they need to weed that hatred out of their heart. Not an easy thing to do. There's reasons why that hatred exists. And yet, we work for good from the goodness in us, from within the goodness in us. So I'm aware of these things. And why is that comma necessary? When we talk about Ukraine, we don't have a comma. And you know there's ordinary Russians that don't support Putin, and the Russian people are suffering. Or when we talk about the Holocaust, we don't add a comma obligatorily. Well, you know there were people in Germany who didn't support the Nazi regime or the Third Reich. Ordinary Germans suffered too. No, with this third situation, when it comes to Gaza and Palestinian human rights, the comma, which is always occurring, is about the fact that the Israeli state has superimposed support for it with Jewish identity. So if you call into question any single action of the Israeli state, the government of Israel, you are potentially anti-Jewish. This is a deliberate superimposition that has occurred for political purposes over decades. Over decades. And if anybody understands the legitimacy of criticizing governments, it is us Unitarian Universalists. It doesn't matter whether it has been a Democratic administration or Republican. We take note of the actions of our government, and where it falls short, we gladly will point it out, organize for it, and urge the government to do better. There is no reason why it's not possible to have a similar conversation about other government actors, including the government of Israel. The problem is this intentional superimposition has to be detangled and separated. It needs to be clear that we can absolutely be pro-Judaism, in support of the Jewish people, anti-harmful rhetoric and language that hurts the Jewish people and actions. And we can legitimately criticize the actions of a state such as the government of Israel. Now, that's not the only little bit of a problem or challenge, this superimposition that often goes unchallenged. The other is our own complicity as citizens of the United States. We do not, as citizens of the United States, fund the government of Russia. We do not, as citizens of the United States, fund the Myanmarese junta, the government of Burma. For my entire lifetime, probably yours as well, the government of Israel has been one of the top 3 aid recipients annually for decades and decades, year upon year. We fund that government to the billions of dollars annually. Annually. And then when we call up their government, after years of billions and billions of dollars subsidizing this foreign nation, and say, you know, your indiscriminate bombing of civilians, your starvation of civilians, we think you might need to take a little bit of a look at that. You might need to think a little bit about how you're approaching human rights and how you're modeling that for the rest of the world. The government there, the Netanyahu regime, publicly goes in front of the press and says, yes, our allies have had some suggestions for us, but you know we're an independent nation. We make our own decisions for ourselves. Well, then we should look at where our tax dollars are going, where they're going in your name and my name. It is a legitimate question. And it is not related to anti-Jewishness. It is related to how a state actor utilizes its power and authority. Sitting with all of this in the middle of Auschwitz, I found myself arriving at a realization. The otherizing that results in these types of atrocities, horrific atrocities, doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow process. It's a gradual process. And I want to invite you to think about that and hold that with me. It starts with how we, in our hearts, individually, how we interact with just a single person who we might deem is different. How we feel about that single person, deciding that, they're just not as important as me, my beloveds, the people I'm invested in, the people I care about. That person is just not as important. That then, on the basis of characteristics or identities, can get expanded to the people who are like that they're just not that as important to me as my beloveds, as the people I'm invested in, as the people that I absolutely care about and prioritize in my life. That group of people is not as important. This is where it becomes a slippery slide, once it becomes a whole category of people. And that slippery slide looks like this. Verbal insults and social exclusion go unaddressed. And as they go unaddressed, they lead to interpersonal violence and aggression. And I don't just mean violence in the physical form. Emotional violence is violence. Verbal violence is violence. The insults and exclusion legitimize interpersonal violence. As social violence is occurring, social violence or aggression, the state can then use that as an excuse to support state-sanctioned oppression and violence. The Nazis did not start out with gas chambers. It started out with their public rhetoric that fostered antagonism and hatred, which went unaddressed. And as that antagonism and hatred went unaddressed, it allowed for the justification of moving entire populations into resettlement camps for their own safety. And by the way, you could do some work. These were also work camps. You can work there, engage in a livelihood. And then those resettlement and work camps became extermination camps. I didn't know this. I discovered this when I was there. The Nazis, they used the ordinary pesticides that they already had on hand. They had pesticides on hand that they used to kill rats in these camps. That was the chemical, the one they already had on hand that they developed to use as gas in the gas chambers. They didn't start out there. This all happened in a slide, in a sequence of events that led up to it. The moment we have decided, this is really important. The moment we have decided that another human being, any other human being is other, any other human being is less than, we have taken the first step to justifying why an entire category or group of people may be less than. Now, it's easy to think, because we're liberal and progressive folk, and however you understand that, certainly liberal and progressive religiously, and for many of us, liberal and progressive politically as well. We liberal and progressive folk, and we hear stuff like, I don't do that. Surely, others in our culture do that a lot more than I do. I want us to just hold for a moment the ways in which we, liberal progressive folk, do this routinely. We don't talk about it. It's often held quietly in our hearts as an internalized thing, but we do it. And think of the way that we less than or otherwise by way of academic pedigree, who has what set of degrees and who doesn't, professional status and achievement, who has what title and role and who doesn't, who has what accolades and who doesn't, socioeconomic location in society, who's above me, who's right at my level, who's below me, not at the same level. Political affiliation, oh, we liberals and progressives do this all the time. Those who don't agree with us, the location, size of one's home, who's living in something larger, more extravagant, who's right where we are, who's in a tiny place, much smaller than ours. All these little criteria that intersect and add up and lead to internalized hierarchies of where some folk are, maybe above, equal, but others are less than. Here's the problem with this. Even when we are able to take a few moments and name this, recognize it, social psychology has established through decades of research on this that it is an intrinsic, innate thing that we do as human beings. And we do it from very, very young ages. We notice difference and we prefer similarity. And research studies show that we do this already by the age of 3 months of age, preferring faces that are similar to those of our caretakers, which by and large, for the most part, are usually similar along the lines of race and ethnicity, and holding as different, as potentially scary, unsafe, those faces that are not like those of our primary caretakers. These psychological studies have been repeated across the lifespan, including through childhood, including up to adulthood, and the results are the same. Our intrinsic, innate push is to look for similarity and to find difference a bit unsettling, a bit uncertain, something that causes hesitation in us, maybe even fear. For those who wish to look into this further, it's called the other race effect in the field of psychology. What does this mean for us as adults? It means we wind up over time, because this is so automatic. It's built in, it's a survival mechanism, that's why it's part of our hardwiring. Over time, we wind up creating circles around us of people who are like us. And the people who are like us are comfortable. They are familiar, they feel safe to us. And the people who are not like us are of lesser concern, of lesser regard, of lesser value internally. We never say it out loud, but they just don't matter as much. We always prefer those who are like us, and others who are not like us go down in the mental hierarchy. What this means on a practical level, what this means on a day-to-day level, is that we have to work against our natural, innate instincts to not treat some people as being less than us. Now, this is where religion comes in. Our religion, for example, our faith, our tradition, holds that every human being has inherent worth and dignity. Now, first off, that's an aspiration. Great. Because given what I just explained about how our intrinsic psychology and biology work, it is something worth aspiring to. But it's also something that, and I often hear this, we wonder this, is it even true? It may not be true that every human being has intrinsic worth and dignity. Certainly, I've just given you a case in point, Hitler. Nonetheless, traditions such as ours are built on aspiration. And we can hold the value of inherent worth and dignity as something, by the way, that is akin to an article of faith. It is not provable. You can't prove that every human being has worth and dignity. That's an article of faith. The former president of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, Bill Schultz, he went on to become head of Amnesty International. Great guy. When I was in seminary, he had a new book that had just come out, In Our Own Best Interest, Defending Human Rights, which is basically mandatory reading back in seminary in that time period. And he takes on this question of statements that we affirm that might not even be true, that may not be factual, but still may have value. And what he says is, quote, the question to ask is not, is it true? Rather, the question to ask is, does it work? Does it spread empathy, combat cruelty, and protect the weak from exploitation? This is where our article of faith, our aspirational conviction that every human has inherent worth and dignity, this is where it matters. That to behave, for each of us individually and collectively as a community, to behave as if every human being has worth and dignity makes us a better person. I am behaving like a better person. My community is behaving like a better community. It is better for society. Even if there is the rare exception like Hitler, it is overall better for society as if we behave as if each human being has worth and dignity, than to behave as if that's not true. And that, Bill Schultz says, makes it a worthy aspiration, something that is truly good, not just good, but something that we need, that focuses us, helps us in our living into our humanity. We hold fast to this principle because it makes us better people and it makes society better. Are you with me? Because if you are, there's a course of action that any of us can undertake, and it's not complicated. It really isn't. First, we speak up and act against state-sanctioned atrocities whenever, wherever, and by whoever they may occur. Now, Isabel Wilkerson speaks about this in her book called Caste. It's easy. It's so easy to think in the face of some of the present-day situations I mentioned, what can I as one person, what am I going to do that's going to make a difference for the Ukrainians? What am I going to be able to do that's going to help make things better for the ordinary Palestinian? And yet when we allow that notion to shift us into quietude and acquiescence, we become complicit to the atrocity. And Isabel Wilkerson urges us not to. She calls it the evil of silence. Do not be silent in the face of a known atrocity. And as we saw in our children's story, Desmond about Desmond the mouse, it took a whole bunch of mice to help set that one little mouse free. And each little mouse mattered. Trust that your knowing what is good and right matters, and that it matters that we speak up and act out against state-sanctioned evil or atrocities, whatever language we want to use. Second, now this is the harder part. Now the first part's actually easier for us as Unitarian Universalists because we are a justice organizing people. We love to organize for justice. It is our specialty, what we're known for in interfaith circles. The second part's a little harder. It gets to the spiritual practice that I referenced. We must stay vigilant to the internal things that come up in which we less than and otherize other human beings, and it comes up for each and every one of us, myself included. And the work is to catch it. It's not that it's not going to come up, it's going to come up. The work is to catch it when it comes up, to scrutinize it, to remind yourself, and for me to remind myself, we know better, I can do better than to less than this person, otherize this person. They're just as human as I am. That is day-to-day work. It is spiritual work. It is not easy. It asks a lot of us, but it's worth doing because it makes you a better person. It makes me a better person. It makes our society better. I want to return to that reading from Isaiah. if you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk. Look at this ancient scripture pointing to this very thing. Do away with the pointing finger and the malicious talk, which we do to put somebody else down and establish our own moral superiority. Do away with it, eliminate it, this scripture says. Then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. We are a people of faith, a people of aspiration who don't mind doing the harder work of being better human beings. That's why we are here. That's what this is all about. Please rise and body or spirit in your great hymnals, hymn 168, entitled One More Step. And I encourage you to think of that expansively in terms of what is the one more action, what is the one good thing you can next do to help make this world a better place. Let's join together in singing. Take a moment, gaze around this sanctuary. You're with us in our hearts, those of you that are live streaming or watching on demand. These are your siblings on this journey, learning what it means to be human side by side with you. And it is something we do imperfectly, but we keep striving to do better. Go out into this week knowing that the world needs the goodness that is in your heart. Let it shine forth as brightly as it can for a world that needs it. And know that you are encouraged and held in that aspiration, loved by me, loved by one another, until we are together again. Amen.